Well, good evening or good morning, wherever you find yourself listening to this. I want to welcome you to our midweek Bible study. I want to encourage you to come and be a part of this live when we do it. I would encourage you to do that for the simple fact that, Scripture is pretty clear that we should be together, and it says they studied together. We should do that together the best that we can. The rationale behind it, too, is that we'll all grow from it. Your experiences may be different from somebody else's experiences, and sometimes that's very helpful in helping people understand Scripture better. It also helps us apply it much better, and so I encourage you to come and be a part of that when you're able to. Want to get on with the Bible study today, whereas we're going to get ourselves into chapter 15 of Isaiah. We finished up last week, and we ended up with the destruction of Philistia, and we know that God was kind of taking care of some of the surrounding communities where God's people were still reaching out for help, and God reminded them that He is enough help for them and that they should reach out to Him. And I think that's something that you and I could apply to our lives too daily as well. I mean, we get into the mode of doing things, and when catastrophe happens, and unfortunately it always happens, we begin to look at how we can fix it or how we can deal with it. And unfortunately, we forget to get God into the picture until we're all the way through it and we've exhausted everything that we can do before we ever reach out. And yet God tells us and encourages us and shows us how we should reach out to Him first at the very beginning and all the way through. And as we get started with chapter 15 of Isaiah, which is what we're up to now, this is a second oracle against a neighboring nation. It's a word against or showing what was going to happen to. It's kind of prophetic, obviously, but it's going to show what's going to happen to the Moabites. The first was against the Philistines. That was the first oracle, and we read about that. And this one's against the Moabites. Moab, it's a land or a region of the Moabites. It's just east of the Red Sea, and it reaches to the beginning of the region or territory of Edom. It encompasses an area that's about 30 miles long and about 30 miles wide. Now, the relationship between Judah and Moab is not mentioned regularly as it relates to conflict. However, there are some tensions that arise as it related to claims for the land of Ammon, which is the land that was given to both Reuben and Gad. Prior to that, there are signs that the relationship was relatively good or awkward at best, but nonetheless it was good, and even immigration, and there was easy movement in between the nations, and you get some of that out of, like, for example, the story of Ruth. We talked last week briefly about the idea that God was destroying the proud other nations around Israel, but also taking out the choices that the nation had for calling for help from other nations. Doesn't mean that God's destroying them and they were unscathed in all of this or not worthy of being destroyed. They'd actually done stuff wrong, but remember, Israel was set to have God as their leader, and that was it, not a bunch of other gods. That's part of the Ten Commandments. That's part of everything you see throughout the middle of Genesis, even the beginning of Genesis and creation, but also all the way through Leviticus and all of that, where you see the God's instructions for the people and how they were to worship Him, but most of all, how they were to address Him. Moab would be one of these nations that God's people could call out for help. And this prophetic statement would show the utter destruction that Moab would receive and the immigration that would happen after this destruction. In other words, the fleeing. The destruction would lead to weeping and flight. And so in this, you'll see genuine sorrow for what was going on, but you'll also see people run. And so those are two themes that you'll see in here. So let's get started with chapter 15. It starts out, it says, "The burden against Moab, because in the night Ar of Moab is laid waste and destroyed. Because in the night Ker of Moab is laid waste and destroyed." Now this verse provides some sort of introduction, if you will, but it mentions a great city in the north, that's Ar, and the great city in the south, which is Ker. And although these are two major cities that are listed, this oracle shows the swiftness of the destruction that would happen. However, it doesn't necessarily indicate that the battle would be done immediately. It just indicates that when the battle happens, it will be done very swiftly. And so it will get to the point, if you will. Now, the next three verses here, 2, 3, and 4, let's read them real quick, and then we can kind of discuss what they mean. It says, he has gone up to the temple and Dibon, to the high places to weep. Moab will wail over Nebo and over Medeba, and all the heads will be baldness, or on all their heads will be baldness, and every beard cut off. In their streets they will clothe themselves with sackcloth. On the tops of their houses and in their streets, everyone will wail, weeping bitterly. Heshbon and Elealai will cry out. Their voice shall be heard as far as Jahaz. Therefore the armed soldiers of Moab will cry out. His life will be burdensome to him. Now these verses indicate something like a death has occurred. And you can see the incredible mourning that's taken place. Remember when Job, in the book of Job, when he lost his family, it said he shaved his head and he put on sackcloth. That was an act of grief and being able to deal with the grief. And it was also to lament something, and that's exactly what was happening here. Now, verse 2 points to going to a high place, which would have been a place of reverence. And so you see that where it talks about the temple of Dibon. It would have gone there. And then Nebo, that's referring to Mount Nebo, and that's a place where Moses saw the promised land. And it would have been a great defensive position. If you've ever been there, you can see everything all around. And very high place, very good place of defense to be able to defend. And so it would have reached all the way up to the height and its surroundings. Heshbon and Elealai are northernmost cities, and they're in contested area, but they're very close to one another. Jahaz, on the other hand, is in the south again. So you're seeing a complete destruction of the entire nation, not just a portion of it. The text says that even the armed soldiers will cry out. Now these verses show both the weeping or lamenting and lamenting that would happen over this destruction, and even the mightiest of warriors would be brought to their knees. We think of somebody that's battle hardened or somebody that's able to be strong and take care of battle, and these people would ultimately be humiliated. Verse 5, and this will kind of take us all the way to verse 9 or the end of this chapter. It says, my heart will cry out for Moab. His fugitives shall flee to Zoar like a 3-year-old heifer, for by the ascent of Lihith they will go up with weeping, for in the way of Horonaim they will raise up a cry of destruction, for the waters of Nimrim will be desolate, for the green grass has withered away. The grass fails, there is nothing green. Therefore the abundance they have gained and what they have laid up they will carry away to the brook of the willows. For the cry has gone all around the borders of Moab. It's wailing to Eglam, and it's wailing to Beer Elim. For the waters of Dimon will be full of blood, because I will bring more upon Daman, lions upon him who escapes from Moab, and the remnant of the land. And we get a lot out of this. I think we can get tied up in some of the figurative stuff here, but you're going to see in all these verses, you're going to see the flight part. So we saw the weeping earlier, or in that last section. This part we see the flight part. And the interesting thing about it is that you have to understand and just get this picture in your head. Think of people who are in a battle-ridden area, and things are being destroyed around them, and they have gathered up only the possessions, their remaining possessions that they can carry, and they are clutching them. They're frightened. They've been uprooted from everything that was normal to them, and they're trying to flee for their safety. If you want a modern look at that today, look back on YouTube or some other news resource where you can get video of the people in the Ukraine when Russia attacked. And you can see people fleeing battle areas where they're trying to get away, and they're frightened, and they've been uprooted, and everything's been destroyed. They're holding what little possessions that they have, and they're just trying to do everything they can to flee for their safety. That would kind of give you a picture of what's going on here. Now, in some of these things, for example, they will rise up a cry of destruction, for the waters of Nimrim will be desolate. Nimrim is possibly what's called the Wadi Numira, and it's in the southern or the southeastern shore of the Dead Sea. Now think about this for a moment. In the middle of the desert, which is where they are, with no water, it's utterly desolate land, and it's unfit for both humans and animals. So if you can imagine trying to survive without water when your main water source is dried up, it doesn't allow anything to grow. It doesn't allow anybody to have or to fulfill their thirst, and therefore it can be a problem. And so this is a picture of the land being dried up. Now, whether that's figuratively or literally, it really doesn't matter. It's how it's applied. And so I think you've got to understand that when this battle happens, it'll take an ultimate effect on everybody, and it will be devastating, which is what would happen if the water would dry up. In verse 7, it points to gains and provisions. So it says, therefore, the abundance they have gained and what they have laid up, they will carry away to the brook of willows. And essentially all the resources and all the things that they've gained, imagine yourself, and I don't want this to ever happen to you, but imagine yourself if your house were destroyed. You were away on something and your house was destroyed, and everything that you had in your life, all of your possessions, all of that stuff is now gone. All of that stuff that you gained, it's now taken away or destroyed. In the case of the Moabites, the same thing would happen. All these things that they've gathered up would basically be destroyed. And it goes on. It goes on to say that it would be they would carry away to the brook of willows. The brook of willows is said to be the Zered River, which is part of the border of Edom. And so everything would be carried away. It would be taken away. It would also indicate the fact that they were trying to flee. And then when you get into verse 9, it shows really the utter desolation, because it says, for the waters of Demon will be full of blood, because I will bring more upon Demon, lions, upon him who escapes from Moab, and on the remnant of the land. So there would be no escape. And so it would chase you. It's not like something happened and you're able to run or you're free to run. It would be pursuing you, which is where you get with the lion part of that. But sure is not a good thing. But God's pretty serious about when he said, I need you to trust me and to rely on me. And quite honestly, people, that's the same thing that he's doing with us. We need to trust him and rely on him. We say we have faith. Well, faith needs to be backed up with the trust part, so that when we walk in faith, we absolutely trust him and we absolutely are faithful that he will deliver. And you know he will every time. Pray that God will bless you. We look forward to chapter 16 next week, where we continue kind of the next little section as it relates to this one that we started in chapter 15. And we will finish that part off and then move on to the next part of our study of Isaiah. But look forward to seeing you. Look forward to seeing you in person. I pray again that God will bless you and that he will keep you safe as well.